Okay, we're back. I'm just gonna wait. Okay, I don't think anyone's there just yet. Hey, Belong. I'm just gonna wait for some other folks to join us. Give it about probably until like 12:05. And I got a quick question. Is it too noisy in here? Because I had to sit by like the AC units and stuff. So, and also the TV is on. I just want to make sure that folks can hear me properly. Okay, thank you so much. Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can put this right here. Because, this should be fine. I'll just let it be. I had to plug up my phone. Alright, so I'll give it like another minute or two. I'll give it probably like, maybe 12:07. Oh, Carmen, I can, 1 second, I can turn this. Carmen, I thought you had one. Okay, this way. Come on. I'm sorry. Here you go. I got it. Okay. I guess I'm just going to get into reading because I don't want to let too much time go by. So, this week, I will be reading a book with the name and the title, and the book that I chose is Assata, and it's an autobiography by Assata Shakur, and it has some forewords by Angela Davis and Lennox S. Hines. So I will start with the foreword. And then I'll read the first chapter, and then I will also read the last chapter. Hi. So, and it begins. In the 1970s, as Assata Shakur awaited trial on charges of being an accomplice to murder, I participated in a benefit at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, to raise funds for her legal defense. At the time, Assata was being held nearby in the Middlesex County Correctional Facility for Men. Lennox Hines, a member of the Rutgers faculty, had invited me to be... Ooh, let me take off these glasses because they're fogging up. had invited me to be one of the future speakers at the benefit. Lennox was a leader of the National Conference of Black Lawyers and Lennox was a leader of the National Conference of Black Lawyers and represented Assata in a federal lawsuit contesting the appalling conditions of her confinement in the New Jersey prison. He had previously worked on my case, and we had both served in the leadership of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression since its founding in 1973. Attending the benefit were Rutgers faculty members, a sizable number of black professionals, and local activists who were the mainstay of numerous campaigns to free the political prisoners of that era. It was an upbeat event with the optimism of the times. My own recent acquittal on charges of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy stood as a dramatic example of how we could successfully challenge the government's offenses against radical anti-racist movements. However powerful the forces arrayed against Assata, the FBI's counterintelligence program, and the New York and New Jersey police organizations, no one could have ever persuaded us then that we were not capable of building a triumphant movement for Assata's freedom. This benefit was one small step in that direction, and as we left the event, we were quite satisfied with the $3,000 we raised that afternoon. By then, every radical activist had learned to assume that our public meetings were subject to routine police and/or FBI surveillance. Yet, we were entirely unprepared for what seemed like a reenactment of the 1973 events for which Assata faced charges of murder. Assata Shakur and Sundiata Acoli had been stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike by state troopers who claimed that they had a faulty taillight. The encounter left Assata critically wounded and two others, State Trooper Warner Forster and Assata's friend Zaid Shakur, dead. As a group of us left the benefit, we drove down on a county road towards Lennox Hines' house, where we were having a small after party, where we were quite startled when local police signaled for our car to stop. My friend Charlene Mitchell, at the time an executive director of the Alliance, was told to step out of the car along with the driver and the other person riding with us. As the policemen taunted us by clearly placing their hands on their holstered guns, I was instructed to remain in the otherwise empty automobile. Lennox, whose car had been following, immediately double-backed and approached the police with his attorney's identification card in hand, explaining that he was our lawyer. This caused the officers to become more visibly nervous, including the one who pulled a riot gun from his police car and proceeded to aim at Lennox from close range. And before I continue, I just want to let y'all know that the book obviously talks about racism and has how do I put this? Basically, the book, there are some violent encounters, so if that could be triggering for you, I would say that you probably don't want to continue, but I just want to put that out there so that way no one is caught off guard by that. So, and I will continue. All of us froze. We knew only too well that any innocent gesture could be constructed as a reach for a weapon, and that this confrontation could easily become a recapitulation of the events that had left Assata with a murder charge. The explanation given by police for the ambush was a warrant for my arrest, later proven false. Though they allowed us to leave, it was only shortly after we arrived at Lennox that we discovered that they had already called for reinforcements and literally surrounded the house. With one of the first black woman judges in New Jersey and several other prominent community figures at the House, we were nonetheless compelled to call on higher powers in the form of Congressman John Conyers in Washington. We figured a request for a federal escort out of the state of New Jersey might put some pressure on the local police. These were the kinds of measures and friends needed in such a volatile time. I relate this incident in detail because it may help readers of Assata's autobiography not only to focus on the political role of the police during the 1970s, but also to better understand the important historical aspects of the routine racial profiling associated with current police practices. Such a historical perspective is especially important today when brazen expressions of structural racism, such as the pattern of mass imprisonment to which communities of color are subjected, are invisible by the prevailing moral panic over crime. And if this were not enough, we find that at the same time, such remedies as affirmative action programs and such safety nets as social welfare are being constantly de-established. When Richard Nixon raised the slogan of law and order in the 1970s, it was used in part to discredit the Black liberation movement and to justify the deployment of the police, courts, and prisons against key figures in this and other radical movements of that era. Today, the ironic coupling of a declining crime rate and the consolidation of a prison industrial complex that makes increased rates of incarceration its economic necessity has facilitated the imprisonment of 2 million people in the United States. In this ideological context, political prisoners like Assata Shakur, Mumia Abu Jamal, and Leonard Peltier are represented in popular political discourse as criminals who deserve either to be executed or to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. During the late 1990s, the racist hysteria directed against Assata was recitated when the New Jersey State Police prevailed upon Pope John Paul II to use the occasion of his first trip to Cuba as a pressure for Fidel Castro to extradite Assata. As if this were not enough, New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman offered a $50,000 reward, later doubled for Assata's return, and Congress passed a bill calling on the government of Cuba to initiate extradition procedures. In an open letter to the Pope, Assata asks a question that should concern all of us. Why, I wonder, do I warrant such attention? What do I represent that is such a threat? We would all do well to seriously ponder her questions. Why, indeed, she was constructed by the government and mass media as an enemy in the 1970s, only to reemerge at the turn of the century as a singular target of governors, Congress, and the fraternal order of police. What has she been made to represent? What ideological work has this representation performed? In the 1970s, Assata Shakur's image was deployed in an official FBI wanted posters and in the popular media as visual evidence of the terrorist motivations of the Black liberation movement. Black militants were assumed to be enemies of the state and were associated with the communist challenges to capitalist democracy. The protracted search for Assata, during which she was demonized in ways that are now unimaginable, served further to justify the imprisonment of vast numbers of political activists, many of whom remain locked up today. 25 years later, the retailoring of the image of Assata as an enemy is even more damaging, omitting to the original political context and representing her as a common criminal, a bank robber, and murderer. This lifting of her image out of the past for very contemporary purposes serves to justify the consolidation of a vast prison industrial complex, which Assata herself has described as not only a mechanism to convert public tax money into profits for private corporations, but also an essential element of modern neoliberal capitalism. In her view, this new formation serves two purposes. One, to neutralize and contain huge segments of potentially rebellious sectors of the population, and two, to sustain a system of super exploitation where mainly Black and Latino captives are imprisoned in white rural overseer communities. As the above quotation reveals, Assata remains very much engaged with the contemporary radical politics specific to the United States, even though she has been unable to visit this country since her escape from prison and her decision to settle in Cuba many years ago. As you read her extraordinary autobiography, you will discover a woman who has nothing in common with the hostile representations that refuse to expire. I urge you to reflect on what it must mean for her to have been unable to attend her mother's funeral or to visit with her new grandchild. As you follow her life story, you will discover a compassionate human being with an unswerving commitment to justice that travels easily across racial and ethnic lines and in and out of prison and across oceans and time. She speaks to all of us, and especially to those who are sequestered in a growing global network of prisons and jails. At a time when optimism has receded from our political vocabulary, she offers invaluable gifts, inspiration, and hope. Her words remind us, as Walter Benjamin once observed, that it is only for the sake of those without hope that hope is given to us. And the foreword was written by Angela Davis in 2002. So I guess I'll get on to the second part of the foreword. And hi for everyone that has joined us during, like, when I was reading. So the category for the book is a book with the name and the title, and I chose Assata, which is an autobiography by Assata Shakur. And I'm reading the foreword, the first chapter, and the last chapter. And this is the second part of the foreword. The publication of this extraordinary autobiography provides a rare opportunity to see behind the carefully orchestrated distortions of fact concerning the life and motivations of Assata Shakur. Writing simply and vividly about the racism that permeated her childhood and young womanhood, those ordinary experiences of Black people in the United States that have driven millions to despair and many to rebellion. Assata leads us all to understand more about the society that we live in. Clearly, it was the racism riddling every aspect of the early life of the sensitive, intellectually gifted, and life-passionate child as she struggled to establish her own identity that led her to seek solutions to the catastrophic impact of racism and economic oppression on all people of color in the United States. It is racist America that provides the context for the making of this Black revolutionary. People struggling for self-determination are a phenomenon of the 20th century. These struggles are frequently understood and supported by people of goodwill in the United States. When the struggles take place in South Africa, El Salvador, and the Philippines or refugee camps, Assata Shakur's own words as she writes about her struggles for growth and meaning in the streets of New York and in the South as a child and as a woman present as clear a case for self-determination and development in the United States, as do the lives of her brothers and sisters throughout the world. Although her book is intensely personal, it is also absolutely political. She writes about her experiences not as a historical icon seeking to crystallize the official life, but as one whose experiences searching for change can provide a key to her own life and to all those others, who, as she so vividly puts it, have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy, and for whom a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. As a lawyer, teacher, and student of history, I know that while Assata's story may be unique in its energy, creativity, and passion for life and principle, it is typical of the ways the United States has responded historically to individuals that the government sees as a political threat to domestic tranquility. Since Assata touches only lightly on the events that led to her being a target for police fire on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973, and on the flimsy evidence of which she was finally convicted in 1977, I will attempt to sketch some of the details that contributed to the fearsome image generated by the state and perpetrated in the media. As I first met Assata Shakur in 1973, as she lay in the hospital close to death, handcuffed to her bed, while state, local, and federal police attempted to question her, as the national director of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, an organization that has been called on to defend political activists and the black community since its founding in 1968, I was no stranger to the carefully orchestrated disinformation campaigns that federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies had engaged against black activists under the leadership of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Prior to meeting Assata, we had represented Angela Davis and initiated inquiries into the 1969 police executions of the Black Panther leaders Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in the 1971 police attack, and indictments of the leadership of the Republic of New Africa, and had defended many other black men and women who had been identified as targets of the FBI. The FBI's systematic surveillance of and attacks on black groups and individuals were orchestrated by its counterintelligence program. I believe it was called COINTELPRO, which was directed specifically against what the FBI termed black nationalist hate groups. The FBI's first targets were Martin Luther King and thousands of less prominent civil rights activists. Elsewhere, I have written extensively about the program and the criminal disruption and destruction of black leaders and groups that were the specific goals of this government program. The documents collected in the Church Committee report of the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with the respect to intelligence activities were also reprinted in that book. In addition, the findings of the Domestic Intelligence Subcommittee, headed by Senator Walter Mondale, which were published by the U.S. Government Printing Office in 1976, provided documentation of this government-sponsored conspiracy against the civil and human rights of all sorts of political activists, and most particularly black people. It is important to remember that Assata Shakur's decision to join the Black Panthers occurred soon after J. Edgar Hoover ordered the 41 FBI offices to intensify their efforts to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize black nationalist organizations and their leaders. One second, y'all. I'm just seeing how long this forward is, because I might just get into the first chapter. It's about like 6 more pages, so I'm going to skip to the first chapter. So, yes, let me just go back. All right, and I'm going to start with chapter 1, which does have a lot of police brutality. If you do not want to engage in that. I just want to let you know that the first chapter does have a lot of that in here. So, and I will begin. There were lights and sirens. Zaid was dead. My mind knew that Zaid was dead. The air was like cold glass. Huge bubbles rose and burst. Each one felt like an explosion in my chest. My mouth tasted like blood and dirt. The car spun around me, and then something like sleep overtook me. In the background, I could hear what sounded like gunfire, but I was fading and dreaming. Suddenly, the door flew open, and I felt myself being dragged out onto the pavement. Pushed and punched, a foot upside my head, a kick in the stomach. Police were everywhere. One had a gun to my head. Alright, is everything good? Everything's good. Which way did they go? He was shouting. I nodded my head across the highway. I was sure that nobody had gone that way. A few of the cops were off and running. One pig said, "We ought to finish her off." But the others were all busy around the car searching it. They were pulling and prodding. "You find the gun?" they kept asking each other. Later, one of them asked another, Should we put her in the car?" "No. Let her lay in the gutter where she belongs. Just get her out of the way." I felt myself being dragged by the feet across the pavement. My chest was on fire. My blouse was purple with blood. I was convinced that my arm had been shot off, and I was hanging inside my shirt by a few strips of flesh. I could not feel. My internet is bad in here. My chest was on fire. My blouse was purple with blood. I was convinced that my arm had been shot off, and I was hanging inside my shirt by a few strips of flesh. I could not feel it. Finally, the ambulance came, and they moved me into it. Being moved was agony, but the blankets were worth it. I was so cold. The medics examined me. I tried to talk, but only bubbles came out. I was foaming at the mouth. Where is she hit?" they asked each other as if I wasn't there. They concluded their examination, and I was relieved. "Let's move it," one of them said. "Okay, but wait a minute," the driver, and he got out. "Hit twice," I heard him say. "We gotta wait." The driver slammed the door. He said something else, but I didn't understand it. Time passed. I was floating off again. It felt so weird, like a dream, a nightmare. More time passed. It seemed like forever. I was in and out, in and out. A rough voice asked, "Is she dead yet?" I floated off again. I heard another voice. "Is she dead yet?" I wondered how long the ambulance had been sitting there. The attendants looked nervous. The bubbles in my chest felt like they were growing bigger. When they burst, my whole chest shattered. I faded again, and it was down south in the summertime. I thought about my grandmother. At last, the ambulance was moving. If I live, I remembered thinking, I'll only have one arm. The hospital is glaring white. Everybody I see is white. Everyone seems to be waiting. All at once, they are in motion. Blood pressure, pulse, needles, etc. 2 detectives come in. I know they're detectives because they look like detectives. One of them has a face like a bulldog, with jaws hanging down the sides. They supervise the nurse as she cuts off my clothes. After a while, one of them dabs my fingertips with what looks like Q-tips. Later, I found out that this is the neutron activation test to determine whether or not I have fired a weapon. Another one then tries to fingerprint me, but he has trouble because my hand is dead. "Give me the dead man's kit." He puts my fingers into spoon-looking things used to fingerprint dead people. They begin to ask me questions, but a bunch of doctors come in. One of them, who appears to be the head doctor, examines me. He pokes and prods, throwing me around like a rag doll. Then, like he is going to kill me, he jerks me around so that I'm on my stomach. The pain is like an electric shock. I moan. Hold on, y'all. I'm going to move my phone over here because it is on like 10%. Bear with me, y'all. I'm sorry. I will just put my phone right here. I'm gonna have to just hold y'all sideways because my phone is going to go out, but y'all can still hear me. They begin to ask, actually I passed that. So, the pain is like an electric shock. I moan. Don't cry now, girlie, he says. Why'd you shoot the trooper? Why'd you shoot the trooper? I want to kick him in the face. I know that he would kill me if he had the chance. I can see the scalpel slipping. One of the other doctors is saying something about calling the operating room. Hell no is all I can think of. Hell no. After a while, they all leave. Then a black nurse comes into the room. I am glad as I could be to see her. She bends over me. What is your name? She asks. What is your name? I think about it and decide to say nothing. If I tell them my name, they will know who I am and they will kill me for sure. What is your name? She keeps asking. Enunciating each syllable in the way that people talk to someone who has trouble hearing or understanding. What is your name? What is your address? Where do you live? Her voice is getting louder. We need your signature, miss, she says, waving a piece of paper in front of me. We need your permission for treatment in case we have to operate. She repeats the same thing over and over. Who shall we contact in case of emergency? I think that's kind of funny. What is your name? Where do you live? I close my eyes, wishing she would go away. She keeps right on talking. I drift off, thinking about my arm. It's still there. Nerve damage, paralyzed, I hear them say. It has never occurred to me. It isn't that bad, I remember thinking. I can live with that if I have to. More voices, other voices, grating my ears in my consciousness. She can talk, one is saying. The doctor says she can talk. Where were you going? What is your name? Where are you coming from? Who was in the car with you? How many of you were there? I know she can hear me. I keep my eyes closed. One of them leans down real close to me. I feel his breath on my cheek, and I smell it. I know you can hear me, and I know that you can talk. And if you don't hurry up and start talking, I'm gonna bash your face in for you. My eyes fly open in spite of myself. Immediately, they are all in my face, throwing question after question at me. I say nothing. After a while, I close my eyes again. Oh, she doesn't feel good, one of them says in a sweet, mocking voice. Where does it hurt? Here? 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 Which each here comes a crash. I look around wildly, but no one is there. More thumps and punches, but none of them hurts. But none of them hurts as bad as my chest is hurting. I try to scream, but I know immediately that that's a mistake. My chest erupts and I think I'm gonna die. They go on and on, questions and bangs. I think they will never stop. A woman's voice. Telephone. Thank you, one of them says, giving me an ugly grin. They are gone. Another pig comes in, a black pig in uniform. He comes closer, and I see that he is not a cop, but a hospital security guard. He stands not too far from where I am lying, and I can see that he is not at all hostile. His face breaks into a kind of reserved smile, and very discreetly he clenches his fist and gives me the power sign. That man will never know how much better he made me feel that in that moment. The detectives come back with the nurse. They begin to move the stretcher. My mind races. Where are they taking me? The only place I can think of is the operating room. When we arrive at the X-ray room, I'm thankful. Because I have to move around, the X-rays are painful, but the technician is cool. Excuse me, y'all. X-rays are over, and I am rolled down the hallway, determined to keep my eyes closed. All of a sudden, flashes of light. My eyes pop open. This time, they are taking my picture. The police photographer asks, "Don't you want to give us a smile? Come on, give us a smile." I close my eyes again. We are moving. The stretcher stops. One of the pigs tells the nurse that he has a headache. She volunteers to get him something. The stretcher is moving again. Where the hell are they taking me? Again, the light is changing, and although my eyes are closed, I can feel the difference. It feels like I'm in the dark. I can't take it any longer, and I look. The room is dark, but there is some light. My eyes slowly adjust. There is something lying next to me. I can see an outline, something in plastic, something My mind slowly realizes that it is a man in a plastic bag, and that man is Zaid. My body stiffens, my mind spins. One of the troopers says, "That's what's going to happen to you before the night is over if you don't tell us what we want to know." I say nothing, but inside I'm raging. Dogs, swine, filthy pigs, dirty, slimy scum, bastards, sons of bitches. I rage on and on. I wouldn't tell you the right time of day, I remember thinking. I wouldn't tell you that shit stinks. The night crawls along, nurses, doctors, and troopers. I am still scared, but I am just as angry and evil as I am scared. The detectives are in and out. When nobody is there except them, they get in their digs and bangs. But after a while, I don't think about them too much. I'm thinking about living, about surviving, thinking about what is going to happen next. They are going to do what they are going to do, and there isn't much that I can do about it. I just have to be myself, stay as strong as I can, and do my best. That's all. There is nowhere to run, and I am in no shape to try. I realize how isolated and vulnerable I am. What if I really do need to get an operation? I need help from the outside world. I have to try to get word out to someone. The black nurse has been back and forth asking me the same questions. Each time I have my eyes closed until she goes away. I decide to ask her to get in touch with my people the next time she comes by. Maybe she will be cool. She is my best shot. The guard is long gone. I doze off for a while. When I wake up, a nurse and priest are standing over me. The priest is mumbling, and he seems to be rubbing something on my forehead. At first, I don't understand what he is doing. Then it dawns on me. Last rites. Last rites are for the dying. Go away, I say out loud. I don't have any strength to say anything else. But I know I don't want to be anybody's last rites. I am not going to die. And even if I do die, I'm not going to die nobody's hypocrite. The black nurse comes in and starts her questions again. Before she can get started good, I beckon her to come closer. There is no one else around. I ask her to get in contact with my lawyer, who is also my aunt. I give her my name and ask her to make the call herself. She has a hard time understanding me and keeps asking me to repeat my name. I can barely talk, and each time she asks me to repeat myself, I feel like screaming. Then it occurs to me that Assata is foreign to her ears. She has probably never heard the name before, so I give her my slave name. Then I give her the number, and she is off and running. 2 minutes later, the detectives are on me like white on rice. They threaten and plead, reason, and offer me the world. They hurl question after question at me, acting crazier than before. One placed a nice cop who was trying to save me from the bad cop if I will only cooperate. I'm tired, and their act is even tireder. I can see exhaustion in their faces. The whole night is coming down on me. Their voices begin to sound far away. I can't take it anymore. They can go to hell. I am going to sleep. This time, I am going out for real. When I wake up, the stretcher is moving. After a little while, we arrive at the intensive care, a part of the hospital. The place is packed with nurses. I am elated. All I want to do is sleep. Soon I'm drifting off again. I wake up and it's the next day. The doctors are making their rounds. One of them, an intern, I think, is very kind to me. They examine me and spend the rest of the morning doing blood tests, x-rays, EKGs, etc., etc. Soon I learn that they're going to move me again. I also find out that I'm in the Middlesex County Hospital. I hear the nurses talking. They're glad I am being moved because the police are driving them crazy. When they come to move me, it looks like a police parade. The rooms I am moved to are called the Johnson Suite. I can't believe it. I have never imagined that hospitals will have rooms like this. There is a sitting room, a huge hospital-equipped room where I am kept, a den, a kitchen, a full bathroom, and another little room whose purpose I will never learn. They transfer me to the bed and handcuff one of my legs to the side rail. I keep looking around. It is elegant and clearly for rich people. I'm probably the first black person who has ever been in this room, and the only reason I am there is for security. They have sealed off the doors, and no one can enter except through the sitting room next door, where there are 3 state troopers stationed, 2 regulars and 1 sergeant. The police radio in the room cackles all day. A carload of suspicious-looking coloreds in a white Ford coupe. A suspicious-looking Negro walking near the hospital in a blue jacket and sneakers. No suspicious-looking white people are reported. From listening to the police talk next door and to the radio, I learned that the hospital is saturated with state troopers. They seem to be under the impression that somebody is going to try to break me out. I feel better. The Demerol has me flying a little. It makes it easier for me to lie in the contorted position I am forced into because of the cuff on my leg. Later that afternoon, it begins again. Detectives and more detectives. Questions and more questions. This time, the questions are different. Now they want to know about the Black Liberation Army. How big is it? What cities it is in? Who was in it? Etc., etc. But the main focus of their question centers around the guy that got away. I am delighted. I figured that son Diata is somewhere safe now, cooling out. They are more careful where and how they hit me now. I guess they don't want to leave any marks. One sticks his finger in my eyes. I don't know what he has on his fingertips, but whatever it is burns like hell. I think I'm going to be blind forever. He says he will keep doing it until I'm completely blind. I close my eyes and hold them as tight as I can. He strikes me a few more times. Some of the stuff gets into my eyes anyways. Burning tears pour down my face and my whole head is throbbing. I feel like he's going to keep on. But he begins to curse me, calling me all kinds of nigger bitches. Finally, he and the others leave. On one of those first days, a white doctor comes to examine me. He acts very nice, sweet as pie. He examines me slowly, the whole time making friendly conversation. I wonder what kind of specialist he is, since I haven't seen him before, and I know he isn't one of the regulars. He says he knows how terrible I must feel and makes a big deal out of protesting that I'm chained to the bed. He keeps on talking. After a while, pulls a chair close to the bed. Then he starts to ask friendly little questions. The conversation goes something like this. Those guys on the turnpike are rough. They'll give you a ticket for anything. I take the turnpike every day. You live in Jersey? I live in Newark. You ever been there? You must be really lonely up here. I bet you really need someone here to talk to. I went to medical school in New York. You're from there, aren't you? I get suspicious and say nothing to him. I tell him I want to go to sleep and he leaves. I never saw him again. But to this day, I'm convinced he was some kind of police or FBI agent. On the 3rd or 4th day, most of my troubles came to an end. Well, not really, but the punch, bang, and poke prod of my troubles ended. A nurse with a German accent came to my aid. She was one of the morning nurses, very professional and exacting to the point that she could be a pain in the neck, but she was a lifesaver. It was she who had first protested the tightness of the handcuff on my leg. My leg had begun to swell, and she had insisted they loosen it, and that the cuff be covered with gauze. Of course, as soon as she was gone, they tightened it again, but the gauze helped somewhat. I could tell by the little things she said and did that she knew what was going on. One morning, she came in, as usual, and after she had finished her normal routine, she reached behind the bed, pulled at something, and handed me an electric call button on a cord. Anytime you need me or need anything from the nurses, just press this button. Don't be afraid to use it, she added, giving me a knowing look. I could have kissed her. Later, when she returned to the room, after the troopers realized that the call button, one came in behind her. Is there any way to disconnect that thing, he asked. She might hurt someone with it or hurt herself. No, she said. There is no way to remove it. If you pull it out, it will just keep ringing in the nurse station. She is having difficulty breathing, and she needs it. Right on, I thought. I'm assuming this is German, but I can't say it, so I'm going to just skip right past it. After that, whenever the police came within 2 feet of my bed, I would push the button. finally gave up the idea of beating on me and contented themselves with threats and other kinds of harassment. A favorite was to stand in the door and point guns at me. Each day was my last day on earth. Each night was my last night. After a while, I became accustomed, immune. Sometimes they would cock a gun I didn't know was empty, give a long, impassioned speech, and then pull the trigger. Other times, I was invited to a game of Russian roulette. They all expressed a bitter hatred for me. They were state troopers, and I was accused of killing one of them. Every day, there were 3 shifts of police. When they changed the shift, the 2 troopers would salute the sergeant. Some saluted an army salute, but others saluted like the Nazis did in Germany. They held their hands in front of them and clicked their heels. I couldn't believe it. One day, one of them came in and gave me a speech about how he fought in World War II on the wrong side. He went on and on about how there was no question that he believed everything he said. He talked about how messed up the world is, how decent people couldn't walk the streets. He said that had Hitler won, the world wouldn't be in the mess it is today, that niggers like me, no good niggers, wouldn't be going around shooting every New Jersey state trooper. He went on to say that the white race had invented everything because they were smart and worked hard, that other races wanted to riot and use terrorism to take everything the white race had worked so hard to get. I had a hard time keeping my mouth shut. He talked about empires, the Roman, the Greek, the Spanish, and the British. He told me that white people created empires because they were more civilized than the rest of the world. White people created ballet and opera and symphonies. Did you ever hear a nigger writing a symphony? He asked. Every day he gave me a speech about Nazism. Sometimes other Nazis would join in. I had asked him if there were a lot of Nazis in the state troopers, but he just laughed and kept on talking. When I was in the Black Panther Party, we used to call the police fascist pigs, but I had called them fascists not because I believed they were Nazis, but because of the way they acted in our communities. As many times as I referred to police as fascists, these shocked me by the truth of my own rhetoric. I later learned that the state troopers in New Jersey was started by a German and that the uniforms were patterned after some German uniform, very similar to the uniforms South African police wear. That they are notorious for stopping blacks, Hispanic, and long-haired people on the turnpike and beating, harassing, and arresting them. The Nazis headed the harassment campaign against me. They spit in my food and turned down the thermostat in my room until it was freezing. For a while, their campaign centered on keeping me from sleeping. They stamped their feet on the floor, sang songs all night, played with their guns, shouted, etc. I told the nurses about it, but it was no use. I could deal with whatever they were putting out, but how long would this go on? I had heard nothing from the outside world, and I didn't even know if anybody knew where I was or whether I was dead or alive. My chest was feeling better, but one second, y'all. I lost my spot. My chest was feeling better, but I could hardly breathe. I thought I was past the point of needing an operation, but I wasn't sure if it was because of the painkillers they had given me or because I had really gotten better. Every day I asked them to contact my lawyer, and every day they said they had tried, but there was no answer. I knew that was a lie because Evelyn had an answering service. Every day I asked them to contact my family. The response to this was usually obscene. Oh, you got family, do you? I'm gonna skip past all that. They went on and on about my family until they found something else to go on and on about. Whoever said that no news is good news had to be out of his mind. I'm going to skip the rest of this chapter and move on to another chapter. I am going to read the poem at the end of this chapter, and it's titled Story. You died, I cried, and kept on getting up, a little slower and a lot more deadly. I'm just gonna get to the end of the book because it's a tad bit, not a tad bit, but it's just a little bit more, I don't know how to put it. It's just a little bit better. And this is the postscript, and it's actually not the last chapter, it is the postscript. And actually I'm going to just read, because we don't have that much time. I'm going to read the conversation between her and I believe it was her aunt when she settled down in Cuba as a political refugee. So, I held my breath as I waited for my aunt to pick up the phone. It had been 5 years since I had last spoken to her. 5 years since I had been able to contact my family. Hopefully, she hadn't changed her number. A click, and then, at last, I heard her voice. I was so happy. Auntie, I almost shouted. It's me, Assata. Who? Assata. Who? It's me, Assata. I'm in Cuba. I'm in Cuba. Oh, I love you. It's so good to hear your voice. How are you? The voice on the other end was my aunt's, but it was so cold I could hardly believe it. Oh, really? Assata. Right. Well, I'm fine. What's the matter, Annie? It's me, Assata. Are you all right? I'm fine. Annie, oh, I missed you so much. It's all right. Everything's okay. I'm fine. How's everybody? How's everybody there? Again, the icy voice. Everything is just fine. What do you want? What do I want? What do you mean, what do I want? I want to talk to you. I love you. You sound so cold. Well, there was a pause, and then, say something so I know it's really you. Something only you and I know. Finally, understanding, I said, the first thing that popped into my head, Annie Panny Jack O'Stanny. It was a stupid childhood rhyme, and nobody else could possibly know about it. I used to taunt her with it when I was a kid. It is you. Oh my God, it really is you, she screamed. Wait, give me a second to catch my breath. How are you? Fine, I said. How's mommy and Kyia? Your mother's fine. Oh, she's gonna be so happy when I tell her that I've talked to you. Kyia's fine. Your daughter's so big. Kyia? I think that's how you pronounce it. Your daughter's so big, you won't recognize her. She's almost as tall as you are. I told her I wanted to call my mother and Kyia as soon as I finished talking to her. No, you call her tomorrow. Well, let me call her first, so she really knows it's you. Where did you say you are? Cuba. I'm calling from Cuba. I'm a political refugee here. Cuba, my aunt repeated. Cuba, are you okay there? I mean, are you safe? I think so, I told her. I feel fine. It seems that way. Talking to Kyia and my mother the next day was like a dream. Hi, this little voice said on the phone. It was almost the most beautiful voice I had ever heard. I was nervous and happy, sweating buckets. How are you? I asked my daughter. Fine. I felt a pot boiling over. All the feelings I kept inside for so long came gushing out. I had a million things I wanted to ask her, a million things I wanted to say. My mother and I made plans. She, my aunt and daughter, would come down as soon as possible. It seemed too good to be true, and it was. Month after month passed by. In order for my daughter to get her passport, she needed a birth certificate. My mother told me that for 10 years, Elmore's hospital had refused to issue her a birth certificate. Finally, after months of hassling, Evelyn had to go to court to get a document proving that my daughter had been born. Over the months that followed, I had begun to understand the kind of hell that the police and FBI had put my family through. After I had escaped, the police had so persistently and brutally badgered my mother that she had a heart attack. What had they done to Evelyn was beyond belief. I understood why Evelyn had reacted to my call the way that she did. At one time, Evelyn's office telephone had 10 intercepts on it. She and my mother had received phony notes in my handwriting. They had received telephone calls with my voice telling them to come to the spot and bring some money. They had found electric eyes and and all kinds of other devices in and around their houses. They had experienced strange break-ins where nothing of value was taken, but they had survived and grown stronger in the process. As the plane swooped down over Havana, it seemed that my heart was beating on my ribs to get out. My stomach hurt. My mouth was dry like cotton. It seemed like a million people poured off the plane before the tall little girl with the great big eyes started down the ramp. I could see my mother looking frail, yet so determined, with my aunt behind her looking triumphant. How much we had all gone through. Our fight started on a slave ship years before we were born. Venceremos, my favorite word in Spanish, crossed my mind. 10 million people had stood up to the monster. 10 million people only 90 miles away. We were here together in their land, my small little family holding each other after so long. There was no doubt about it. Our people would one day be free. That cowboys and bandits didn't own the world. Okay, y'all. Well, that was the foreword, a little bit of the first chapter, and a little bit of the last chapter of Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. And this is the cover. So actually, I'll turn it this way. I think y'all can see this way. So thank y'all for tuning in, and I think the next reading will be in the next 2 weeks. Bye, y'all. 1 second, y'all. I'm not doing